Inflammation is not the problem. The problem is when it refuses to shut off. Most people hear the word inflammation and think of swelling, pain, or injury. You twist your ankle and it swells. You get a cut and it turns red. You catch an infection and your immune system activates. That is acute inflammation, and it is essential for survival. It is your body's repair system. But there is another type, chronic inflammation, and this one behaves very differently. It is not loud. It is not painful. It does not announce itself. Instead, it is quiet, persistent, and systemic, like a fire that never fully goes out, releasing a small amount of smoke inside your body every single day. And over time, that small smoke begins to affect nearly every major system in your body. How chronic inflammation actually starts in the body. In a healthy immune response, inflammation is tightly controlled. It turns on when needed, targets a specific problem, repairs damage, then turns off completely. But chronic inflammation is different. It happens when the immune system stays partially activated, even when there is no real threat. At the cellular level, this is controlled by a key pathway called the NF-kappa B pathway, the master regulator of your body's inflammatory response. NF-kappa B acts like a switch inside your cells that controls inflammatory genes. In normal conditions, NF-kappa B turns on briefly during infection or injury, then shuts off once the threat is gone. But in chronic inflammation, NF-kappa B stays persistently activated, even when there is no injury or infection. This means your body behaves as if something is always slightly wrong, and that single malfunction changes everything downstream. Because once NF-kappa B stays active, it continuously signals your immune system to produce inflammatory molecules, even when they are not needed. Over time, this creates a low-level but constant inflammatory state throughout the body. What chronic inflammation does inside your body. This persistent immune activation slowly disrupts multiple systems at once, not in a dramatic way, but in small, compounding ways that build over time. 1. It disrupts metabolism and increases fat storage. One of the first systems affected is metabolism. Chronic inflammation interferes with insulin signaling, the process that allows cells to absorb glucose from the blood. When insulin signaling becomes less efficient, blood sugar stays elevated longer. Energy is stored more easily as fat. Fat burning becomes less efficient. This is one of the hidden drivers of gradual weight gain, especially around the abdomen. Even more importantly, visceral fat itself contributes to inflammation. It releases inflammatory signals that further activate NF-kappa B. So now you have a loop. Inflammation increases fat storage. Fat storage increases inflammation. A self-reinforcing cycle that becomes harder to break over time. 2. It affects the brain and mental clarity. The brain is highly sensitive to inflammatory signals. When inflammatory molecules circulate in the bloodstream, they can affect neurotransmitters that regulate mood, focus, motivation, cognitive clarity. This is why chronic inflammation is often linked to brain fog, low motivation, reduced mental sharpness, emotional instability. It is not just psychological. It is the brain responding to inflammatory signaling in the body. 3. It reduces energy and increases fatigue. Chronic inflammation places the body in a constant state of low-level stress. Even though it is not strong enough to cause pain, it still requires energy to maintain. Your immune system is slightly active all the time. That means higher baseline energy consumption, lower energy efficiency, increased fatigue even after rest. This is why many people feel tired for no reason. 4. It accelerates cellular aging. Chronic inflammation increases oxidative stress, which leads to accumulation of unstable molecules that damage cells. Over time, this results in slower tissue repair, reduced recovery capacity, joint stiffness, reduced skin elasticity. This process is often referred to as inflammaging, inflammation-driven aging. 5. It weakens recovery and physical performance. Inflammation is necessary for healing, but only when it is temporary. When inflammation is already elevated at baseline, the body struggles to distinguish repair signals. Muscle recovery slows down. Fatigue after exercise increases. Performance plateaus, even with training. It is like trying to repair damage in a system that is already overloaded. 6. It increases risk of chronic disease. Chronic inflammation does not directly cause every disease, but it creates the environment where disease is more likely to develop. It is strongly associated with type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, fatty liver disease, neurodegenerative conditions. The key issue is not one event. It is long-term biological stress. Chronic inflammation damages the endothelial cells lining your blood vessels. This is the direct link between systemic inflammation and cardiovascular disease. Persistently activated NF-kappa B also disrupts insulin signaling in cells, contributing directly to insulin resistance, which is why chronic inflammation and type 2 diabetes so often appear together. Why chronic inflammation develops. The real causes. Chronic inflammation is not caused by one factor. It is the result of multiple small stressors stacking over time. 1. Diet, major driver. Certain foods increase inflammatory signaling when consumed regularly. Refined sugar, processed foods, trans fats, deep-fried foods, sugary drinks. These do not cause instant damage, but long-term exposure keeps inflammatory pathways active. 2. Sleep disruption. Sleep is when the body regulates immune function and repair. Poor sleep leads to elevated inflammatory markers, higher stress hormones, reduced recovery efficiency. Even a few nights of poor sleep can increase inflammation. 3. Chronic stress. Long-term stress increases cortisol. While cortisol is useful short-term, chronic elevation disrupts immune regulation, increases inflammation, promotes fat storage, especially abdominal fat. 4. Physical inactivity movement helps regulate immune activity and circulation. A sedentary lifestyle allows inflammatory signals to accumulate more easily. 5. Excess body fat, especially visceral fat, which actively releases inflammatory molecules. This further strengthens the inflammation cycle. The good news: inflammation is highly reversible. Chronic inflammation is not permanent. It responds strongly to lifestyle changes, especially diet. One of the most effective dietary patterns is the Mediterranean diet. Research consistently shows that the Mediterranean diet reduces CRP, C-reactive protein, one of the primary biomarkers of systemic inflammation. Lower CRP levels indicate reduced overall inflammatory activity in the body. This is important because CRP is one of the most widely used clinical markers for inflammation. Top anti-inflammatory foods, science-based. These foods help reduce inflammatory signaling and support cellular balance. 1. Fatty fish, salmon, sardines, rich in omega-3 fatty acids, which help regulate inflammatory pathways and reduce NF-kappa B activation. 2. Olive oil contains polyphenols that reduce oxidative stress and support cellular function. 3. Leafy greens, spinach, kale, high in antioxidants and micronutrients that support immune balance. 4. Berries rich in polyphenols that reduce oxidative stress and inflammatory signaling. 5. Turmeric, curcumin. Curcumin, the active compound in turmeric, directly inhibits the NF-kappa B pathway, helping reduce chronic inflammatory signaling at its source. This is one of the most important natural mechanisms for lowering inflammation. Other supportive anti-inflammatory foods: nuts and seeds, healthy fats plus antioxidants. Green tea, catechins reduce oxidative stress. Pro-inflammatory foods to reduce chronic inflammation is strongly influenced by consistent dietary patterns. Foods that increase inflammation when eaten regularly include processed meats, sugary foods and drinks, refined carbohydrates, deep-fried foods, trans fats. The key issue is not occasional intake, but long-term repetition. The most important insight about chronic inflammation. Chronic inflammation is not a sudden condition. It does not appear overnight. It builds silently in the background for years. What makes it dangerous is not intensity, but accumulation. Small changes happen at once. Slight drop in energy, slight reduction in focus, slight increase in fat storage, slight delay in recovery. Individually, these feel normal, but biologically, they are connected. They all come from the same underlying process: persistent NF-kappa, B activation, and immune imbalance. By the time the effects become noticeable, they have often been building for years. That is why chronic inflammation feels like it appears suddenly, even though it never actually did. Final understanding. Chronic inflammation is not a disease that appears overnight. It is a state created by long-term inputs: diet, stress, sleep, activity levels, body composition. And because it is driven by lifestyle, it is also highly modifiable. When you reduce inflammatory triggers and increase anti-inflammatory habits, the body begins to shift back toward balance. Energy improves. Recovery becomes faster. Metabolism becomes more stable. Mental clarity improves. The body is not designed to stay inflamed. It is designed to return to balance when conditions allow it. If this changed how you understand inflammation, don't scroll away. Subscribe and watch our blood sugar video, video 17, since insulin resistance connects directly to inflammation.